Hello and welcome to Red Door Studios Technique of the Week, and the first in a series of short clips introducing you to the joys of animation and the different techniques that we can use. If you want to have a go, then all you will need is paper, our peg bar. Peg bars are about £3 each, so you can certainly get one of those very, very cheaply indeed. A wonderful pencil. This is my favourite pencil at the moment, so I'm glad it's having its screen debut today. And a trusty light box. Now, if you don't have a light box at home, it's not the end of the world. You can use a window as well, as long as it's a nice sunny day outside. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult to draw if you're having to draw on a window. We're just going to take the peg bar down for now. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, although it is quite nice if you like a stable drawing area. We're just doing it because obviously we've got the camera on it today. So a few couple of basic bits of information for you whilst we're just drawing a really simple character. Nothing more than a stickman, really. I'm a big fan of stickmen. I think they can be just as expressive as any other character, and it's probably worth noting, it might sound simple, but the more complicated your character is, the more complicated it's going to be to animate him later on, so you want to make sure you keep it as simple as possible. Okay, so there are 25 frames per second. We're going to cheat, we're going to halve that, and we're going to do 12.5 frames a second. This is called working on twos, and the reason we do it is because not only does it halve your workload as an animator, but your eye won't notice it. If you're watching this animation back, you won't notice that it's got a lower frame rate. Okay, so the next bit of paper goes on, and our trusty light box has let us see through that piece of paper. So you can see here we've got the first drawing underneath and we can see it quite clearly, and that's a good thing. You want to be able to see the movement as we're going on through this particular project. Okay, so I'm drawing this second character in just a slightly different position to the first drawing. So the bigger the difference or space between the first drawing and the second drawing, the faster the movement will appear, and the more subtle or the smaller the change is, that movement will appear slower. I'm going to continue drawing now, remembering that if his weight is on his front foot, as it is in this particular animation, then that foot has to remain in the same spot. Okay. One of my real bugbears is when a weight-bearing foot or limb of some kind seems to skip along the page or slide along a page. We want to make sure that his foot, if it's bearing his weight, is going to stay in the same position. You'll notice in some of these drawings I'm having to trace particularly the character's front foot, because that's in the same place in each of these beginning frames. Now, it doesn't matter how hard you try, you'll never be able to trace perfectly. But that doesn't matter, that's not a bad thing. A really good example is Rhubarb and Custard, where the line seems to have some kind of energy to it. It's got some kind of movement there, even though the character appears to be still. Now, that boil, or traceback as it's sometimes called, is actually quite a nice thing, and it's one of the happy accidents that occur when you're doing traditional hand-drawn animation. Okay, in this particular frame we're doing a bit of a movement arc. Now that's just a bit of a guide for me, so that in future frames I know that I want the character's head to follow this kind of arc shape. We're making him jump here, just doing a little simple jump. So when you jump, you don't just go up and straight back down again. There's generally a nice curved arc involved. So that's just a good little guide. And it's important as well when you're doing hand-drawn traditional animation to play around with a bit of squash and stretch. The great thing about animation is your character isn't static, he isn't rigid. You can play around with your character. Okay, so here all I'm doing in this particular frame is I'm elongating his body a little bit. In other frames his body is actually a lot smaller than this, but I've elongated it just to give it a bit of an idea of movement. It's a really nice way to play and add a bit of bounce into your character. And I want to make sure that our character here, our nice little stickman, lands in the right place. So again, I'm just drawing a little guide into where the floor should be. That's going to make it a little bit easier for me later on when I want to loop this animation and I want it to play over and over again. I know that the character's landing in approximately the right spot. And the character's landing with a bit of a squash. Again, his body in this frame appears a little bit smaller than elsewhere. And when he springs back up, that's a nice bit of action and reaction. Okay, so squashing and stretching your character can be a really useful tool. Now, any of my current animation students who come down to the Red Door on a weekly basis with me will be screaming at the screen right now because I haven't numbered any of these particular frames. Now, it might not seem to matter when you've got 8 or 9 drawings, but if you're doing, say, a 20 or 30 second animation, you will have hundreds of sheets of paper. And if you drop those on the floor, it's going to be disastrous. Okay, so you do want to make sure that you've numbered these pages. If the worst happens, you know, you can always put them back in the right order later on. So there we have it. We've got a nice simple jump animation with our stick character. Really simple. In real time, it took about 7 or 8 minutes to do. So have a go at home. Look out for future techniques of the weeks, and we look forward to hearing from you soon and seeing some of your hand-drawn animations.